Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And the first company presenting today will be Ares Precision Medicine.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Brad Niles. I'm the COO and also the head of R&D for Arise Precision Medicine. And we are targeting cancer at the root cause. So what does that mean? Cancer is a large problem. The drugs are not curative and they're toxic. I'd like to tell a little story to kind of bring home the point of the toxicity. I was on an airplane recently coming to one of these investor type conferences. Sat down next to a guy, and you bring up a conversation. What do you do? He learns that I'm working in cancer therapeutics, and like many of us are familiar, once you talk about that, they want to tell you how horrible cancer-fighting drugs are. I have a friend who's suffering from horrible side effects. And while I told him, unfortunately, I couldn't help him out right away, I'm really excited about the potential that we have for helping people like his friend in the future, because we're trying to make cancer a curable disease, and we're doing that through precision medicine. So let's start off with an example of our data. This is in vitro testing of our siRNA-based therapy in non-small cell lung cancer cells. And so you can see here, we're looking at cell viability in comparison to the untreated. Our product, Arise 047, is killing more than 90% of the non-small cell lung cancer cells. But the really interesting thing about this is we're barely touching the corresponding healthy cells. This gives a great therapeutic index and really makes us excited about our product moving forward. We also compare well with standard of care cisplatin, which isn't nearly as effective in killing the cancer cells, but as you can see here, kills almost as many healthy cells as it does cancer cells. So what is Arise 47? It's a siRNA directed against PRDM2. That stands for positive regulatory domain containing methyltransferases. They're transcription factors that regulate a lot of the pro-growth oncogenes, c-MYC, p53. They're a master regulator. Interestingly enough, in lung cancer, which we all know is a horrible disease, very low survivability at the current drugs that we have now. Interestingly enough, if you look at the human tissue samples, PRDM2 is disrupted in between 50 and 70% of those samples. So this identifies a real patient population that we can go after with our therapeutic. And interestingly enough, because we're looking at PRDM itself, we have a built-in biomarker here, so we can select from a patient population that will actually respond to our drug. So how this works, we package our
Want me to go back?
No, the back button. Thank you, sir.
There we go.
So we package our therapeutic into a nanoparticle. This protects it to allow for systemic delivery. We also have targeted ligands on the outside to allow us to get specifically to the side of the cancer cell. So as you see here, this gets down, recognizes the cancer cell, doesn't recognize the healthy cell, and is able to import in the payload directly into the cancer cell, knock down. It's a truncated version of PRDM2 that exists only in cancer cells. This gives us 2 layers of protection, both in delivery to cancer cells and also a payload that's specific to the cancer cells. This really increases our ability to be safe and effective. So our traction so far, we completed our proof of principle in vitro studies in 4 different cancer drug candidates. Lung cancer is our lead product, but we also have some really compelling data in breast, colon, and multiple myeloma. Our lung cancer is selected as our lead product. We've submitted a non-provisional PCT worldwide patent. And we also have 6 provisional patents submitted. We've sought out and now signed a co-development partner by the name of Sphera Pharma, bringing their expertise for our animal trials for mouse models of cancer. They're an investor. They've committed almost $1 million in co-development funds. We also have a term sheet in place with a VC company for $500,000 when we trigger a $1.5 million investment. Our business strategy is really to shorten the window and decrease the risk of drug development. Our plan is to license off to pharmaceuticals preclinical stage, the IND ready stage. So as such, we've already completed our proof of principle studies. We're looking to complete our proof of concept in vivo animal model studies, do a little bit of pharmacology and toxicology studies to demonstrate the safety, which we think is a big feature of our products, and then license this off to pharma 18 to 24 month window. Again, pharma has changed their business model where they're coming in earlier and earlier. This data shows here that pharma deals with biotechs, 41% are coming at the preclinical stage. So that aligns really well with our goals. I have a couple of examples of some goals, although there are far more than I could list here. One that I wanted to highlight here is Eli Lilly. Paid $100 million to a company called Dicerna, which is also developing a siRNA-based therapy. So this is a hot market now, shortly after the FDA approval of Alnylam's drug Onpattro, an siRNA-based therapy. Our competition, we compare very well to chemo. Immuno-oncology, while it's effective for a subset of patients, it's a very low percentage. We think we can target between 50 and 70% of patients that are disrupted in the PRDM. And our leadership team, Lonnie Bookbinder is our CEO. He has almost 50 years experience in the field. Just finish real quick.
Real quick.
And we also have brought on a number of experts. Innovation was involved in Cerna, which was sold off to Merck for $1.1 billion. Again, we have a great scientific advisory board in place. I will finish with, we're looking to raise $2.7 million. We've already have 1.7 committed. We're just looking to raise the next $1 million to get us through the animal trials. Thank you for your time.
What would your competition be with Eli Lilly's supported company, Dicerna?
Dicerna, yeah. So they're going after very different indications than we are. Those are non-cancer indications. So the siRNA field is an up-and-coming field, but there are no companies currently marketing siRNA against cancer. We'd like to change that.
Can you talk about what your patent portfolio drugs will be covering specifically?
So the PCT non-provisional covers PRDM2 siRNA sequences. A number of them also go through the delivery system with the targeting agents on the outside.
And are the ligands on the outside of the nanoparticle, are those patient specific?
So it's targeting a protein called nucleolin, and it's a receptor that's overexpressed on a number of different cancer types, highly overexpressed. It's a
So it's cancer specific, not patient specific. Thank you.
I'd like to learn more about manufacturing since it is kind of a complex product.
Yes, yeah. So obviously there's more we're going to learn about that as we move along. siRNA manufacturing itself is very routine, and then we're going to have to figure out, in-house at the moment we're doing assembly, but as it scales larger, we'll have to figure that manufacturing partner to help with the assembly into the nanoparticle.
Can you share a little bit more about the economics of the co-development deal? Do they have rights? Like, what is that?
So they're taking an equity position, but they have no rights to the IP. So they'll accumulate equity as the experiments continue, up to, at the end stage, it'll be about 10% of the company.
Purely on an earned basis?
Purely on
An earned basis?
Earned basis, yes. Yeah.
And do they have a board seat?
They will have a board seat.
So from a strategy standpoint, what happens if you don't find a preclinical partner for the asset? Will you be positioned to take them forward yourself?
So assuming the data looks great coming out of the animal trials, if we're unable to find a pharmaceutical partner at that point, it would be a further fundraising round to go in and develop the data a little bit further into the clinical trials, at least through IND.
I wanted to understand a little bit more about the biomarkers. So my sense is that the current generation of genetic treatments is very, very specific. And so how much of the population do you think you can actually touch across what spectrum of these kinds of cancers?
So there are blood tests available now to do methylation PCR to look at methylation status of an individual gene by gene basis. So we can get individual patient biomarker data to see, and as a whole, between 50 and 70% of the patients have shown to be disrupted in PRDM2.
Across a wide range of these kinds of cancers?
So that particular data set is
right.
Yeah. So that particular data set is for non-small cell lung cancer. There's very similar numbers for various different cancer types as well. PRDMs are disrupted in about half of different cancers.
In your slides, you talked about versus control about it. 15% drop off in sales when you use the Ampara's drug.
Yeah.
How do you account for that, and does that make you concerned about toxicities?
So we think, as relatively minor as it is right now, we think we can get it even better if that data isn't from packaged in the drug delivery system. So once we combine that element into it even more, we'll be able to go into the correct cells, won't go to the cells that are not overexpressing the receptor. And
So is the drug delivery had a proof of concept as well, or just the siRNA?
Just the siRNA so far.
Is this a proteome?
Yes, yeah. So we've been priced by a Sacramento, BC company, a $10 million valuation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I forgot to mention that Brad is coming from the UC Davis HM Claus Life Science Innovation Center. The focus of today's session is on technology hubs on the West Coast, and we're trying to give a focus to the early stage companies coming out of those tech hubs. So I meant to mention that at the beginning. The next company presenting is Oncodisc. Oncodisc is a California Life Science Association, CLSA company, and I will get the presentation up. There we go. Do you have the clicker?
I have the clicker.
Great.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you Life Science Nation for this opportunity. I'm James Mitchell. I'm a radiation oncologist, co-founder and CEO of Oncodisc, where we're building a system to improve cancer care by combining remote monitoring with data analytics. We've all been touched by cancer. We all know the big cancer success stories, blockbusters like Herceptin and Opdivo. But today I want to talk about one of the gaps that we still have in cancer care, one that I see every day. Our inability to accurately monitor cancer patients as they go through treatment. I recently cared for a man with advanced lung cancer, and thanks to an amazing response to his immunotherapy, he was in remission, but he was weakened, he declined at home over several days, and got admitted to the hospital with sepsis. And I sat with his family on a Friday night as he died in the ICU. Imagine the anguish of seeing a family member fight cancer and have a great response, but succumb to a preventable complication. Had we known earlier, we could have intervened and he could have survived. So despite all of the advances in cancer care, our ability to monitor patients outside the hospital remains in the dark ages. Amazingly, simply monitoring patient-reported symptoms can improve survival in patients with advanced cancer 20%. It's actually more than most chemotherapy drugs. Imagine what we could see if we added objective biometric data to that. Now my patient, like most chemo patients, had one of these, an implantable vascular access device. Stays in place for months to years and allows for sterile administration of chemotherapy. But it cannot tell us if a patient's getting sicker. Why not? So at Oncodisc, we are building the world's first connected implantable vascular access port capable of remote monitoring of biometric data, connected to a smartphone application to push the data to the cloud, and then send status updates to the care team. With a continuous stream of data into the database, we can apply AI-enabled predictive algorithms to identify patients at need for early interventions. Our data solutions will provide enormous value for pharmaceutical companies doing clinical trials as they can better understand their products and improve the probability of successful drug discovery. CPT codes and reimbursement already exist for the cancer market, so that's where our initial revenue will come from. But our technology will have applications throughout healthcare, including cardiac monitoring. I'm a former Air Force doctor, so I'm excited about the opportunity of improving battlefield medicine. And R&D efforts will be focused in the future on developing onboard blood work capabilities. Competitors include the device companies whose vascular access devices have no monitoring capabilities, the companies that make implantable monitoring devices, who focus mostly in the cardiac space, and then the makers of wearables, which simply don't have the required accuracy and reliability for diagnostic level monitoring of patients at risk of potentially fatal complications. So we've made a lot of progress to date. We filed 4 patent applications, and we're on our 2nd generation of prototype. And in order to get ready for commercial launch in 2020, we're needing $2.5 million. We've already raised $600,000 of that in a seed round. Early adoption will come with clinical trials from our partners at Harvard and Cedars-Sinai. My co-founder and I were both physicians, and we have many years of experience caring for cancer patients and fighting this fight every day. Teddy, our COO, brings 25 years of product development and operational experience in big and small companies at home and abroad. Ultimately, our success will make us an attractive acquisition target from companies from very diverse backgrounds, medical devices, digital health, even pharma. For cancer patients, every day is special, and together we can give them more days at home. Thank you.
So I want to understand why associating the broader analytics with the device itself is so key. Why wouldn't it be just as valuable if you had a shirt full of sensors or a walkthrough set of sensors so you didn't have to go through the complexity of expanding?
Sure. So I think there are a couple of aspects to that. One is cancer patients are getting this device as it is, right? So we already have a compelling reason to implant a device in the body. So we're using that as our platform. But on top of that, using some sort of a wearable device has multiple limitations. It requires patient compliance, but the accuracy is also not as good as we need from a diagnostic standpoint. So take sepsis, for instance, which is a potential complication for a lot of chemotherapy patients. The skin temperature can be very different than the core temperature in patients who are developing sepsis. And so you may actually miss that fever curve as all you're checking is the skin temperature. So with patients that are at risk of potential fatal complications, having that accuracy is critical.
What are your thoughts on reimbursement?
So we will be entering a existing market with existing CPT codes. And so we won't need to go out and get new codes to get reimbursed for the devices themselves. And actually the reimbursement rates for hospitals, ambulatory surgical centers, and physicians leaves quite a bit of room for us to even raise the price over the current asking price of these devices.
Can you talk a little bit more around things on battery life, and I'm assuming there's a Bluetooth connection?
Sure.
And how does that align with an implantable that, in theory, right now has a pretty long life?
Right.
And then a little bit more about the specific data that you are planning on collecting.
Sure. So to the first question, battery life is definitely going to be an issue. Fortunately, we have a great team of electrical engineers who have been working in Silicon Valley for decades, and they're experts at doing this. So the battery life and use will ultimately come down to the algorithms that are going to cycle through the sensors. That said, we fully expect that we will need to do inductive recharging of the device. And so we're working out, how to best do that. But we expect that the battery life should last 1 to 2 months before it needs to be recharged. So, and then as far as the specific things that we'll be sensing, initially it'll be vital signs. So temperature, heart rate, EKG tracings, activity level. But again, we want to focus R&D efforts on expanding the parameters that we can.
Have you, patients don't like having things implanted. And the catheter, currently get the port cath, it's unsightly.
Correct.
You're going to put a larger device into a patient. You're going to create a larger pocket, which is a greater source of infection potentially.
Correct.
Have you done any market analysis that says that people will actually accept that?
Sure. So we certainly talk to patients about this, and we've talked to users. My co-founder is an interventional radiologist, so he implants these quite a bit. So our current form factor is actually about the size in terms of footprint as a dual lumen port. So it's not bigger than a dual lumen port. It's a little bit bigger than a single lumen port, but it's not as high. So overall size is actually smaller than a dual lumen port. But our goal over the generations of the device is actually to shrink it down and ultimately make it perhaps even smaller, because we probably have electronic means of localization rather than having to use palpation to localize.
And second, you're counting on existing CPT codes, but clearly your device is going to be more expensive.
Correct.
So the profit for the hospital will be lower for implanting this. So what argument are you going to make to the hospital say that this would be a cost-effective device to implant?
Sure. So yes, the purchase price may be a bit higher, but ultimately the cost savings in terms of improved outcomes and hospitalizations prevented, readmissions admitted, or readmissions prevented. The overall cost of neutropenic sepsis care in the US is over $2 billion per year. And if we can prevent what is a $30,000 admission for neutropenic sepsis, then I think that justifies a couple $100 extra for the.
Have you modeled that, those numbers? I mean, obviously you're not going to prevent every single one,
Correct.
right? You're going to catch some of them earlier and maybe prevent some of them.
Right.
Do you have any financial modeling around that?
Not specifically for that, and I think a lot of that will come out in our clinical studies as well, as we see exactly how many of those episodes we can prevent.
Okay.
Who's at the other end of this? So the device is picking up troubling indications,
Right.
and they're going up to the cloud, which doesn't change outcomes if nobody's actually paying attention to them with enough context to make an informed judgment.
Correct.
And at the other end, we have doctors and nurses and others who are stretched thin as it is. So
Right.
when you have an extended population enough to pay attention to alongside the patients you have,
Right.
who's going to do that?
Right. So the concept is that the data analytics will do some of the triage in order to prevent unnecessary alerts and only send the meaningful alerts. And how that's received on the end will depend on the workflow. We plan on working with our advisory team on setting that up. I'm an oncologist myself, so I'm very sensitive to this issue. And I do think that it's, so in the Memorial Sloan Kettering study that I showed, they had nurses triage the information coming in, and that led to a significant survival benefit. I think it's reasonable to have a similar model.
I'm afraid we're out of time. We have to move on to the next presenter. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Elemental Health. Elemental Health is out of Silicon Valley Y Combinator and Launchpad Digital Health, if I'm not mistaken. Arup?
We're also with the UCSF Tech Hub, so I've put a call out for Stephanie Maris in the back.
Great.
Can you get my deck up?
Is it?
Does it
I'm
just
sorry.
roll right into it, or?
I'm sorry. There we go. Is there full screen mode? Would it be, is that it? Display. There we go.
Great, hi. So I'm Dr. Rupert Berman. I am former medical director of the ICU at UCSF Children's. I'm co-founder and CEO of Elemental Health. We're a B2B SaaS solution that helps hospitals and healthcare systems get their frontline teams, their nurses, their docs, their residents, so forth, all on the same page and keep them there, and thereby improve quality, safety, and outcomes. The biggest problem in healthcare today is the gap between knowledge and practice. Institutional knowledge is growing at an accelerating pace, but our capacity here is not. The result is inconsistencies in practice, resulting in errors and in waste. So what Elemento does is we help institutions to take frontline adoption of their best practices. Their management has worked really hard on what's the best way we're supposed to get things done in our institution. Their challenge is, how do I spread that at scale? And that's what we do. How do we help? They've got information sitting in binders on various websites above the toilet in the staff restroom. And they're saying, how do I push that out? We help them to push it out to make it accessible, but then we make that knowledge actually actionable so that people can follow, boom, 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 this is what I need to do to make it simple. And that's why the leaders of the Joint Commission say that this is what is needed. It's not just about, do we have the practice, can people actually follow it? Similarly, so much of what our staff does is kinesthetic in nature. Our nurses use their hands. And you give them something on paper, and you'll find 50 nurses do it 50 different ways. But we know our rock stars. You can capture that on an iPhone, boom, put it here, and suddenly that rock star is teaching the enterprise 24/7. So our latest CEO client said, it's a preceptor in my pocket. Helps everyone stay on the same page. And it works. At UCSF, we looked at central line infections, piggybacking on that device we were just talking about. They get infected. So what did we do is we took that top-down knowledge, we made it digestible to the front lines through microlearning, we made it fun for adoption through gamification. The result, and we published this, cut central line infections in half, saving $1 million. We went after hospital-acquired diarrhea, C. difficile, and there, through the same process, we were able to engage teams in the right practices, bring consistency, and cut it 85%, saving tens of thousands. We've done this on the outpatient end, in ambulatory centers, where we've been able to get medical assistants to level up in performance, to be able to help with colorectal cancer screening, with opioid safety, to offload the doctors, and then together, working as a team, they're able to achieve their metrics, improve outcomes, improve reimbursements. How are we different? Historically, teaching has been top-down, didactic, sitting in rooms like this where everybody falls asleep. So how do you make that more engaging? So what you do is you capture that information, you give me just what is relevant, what do I want right now? Learning management systems have tried to do this by moving into digital learning, but they're macro, we're micro. Publishing houses have worked to try to do this through text. We make it easy, engaging, transparent, and we capture feedback. Getting started is easy. We run on any web-enabled device. We can even deploy without hospital IT, directly empowering frontline managers. That allows us to start locally in one unit, prove value, and let them evangelize across the institution and grow into enterprise. People buy us initially for training, but what they ultimately find is that, oh, I can tell which one of my staff are engaged, which one are not. What do they like? What do they not like? What else are they searching for that they can't find? That intelligence is what gets us to grow faster. Our first two clients, Children's Oakland and Children's New Orleans, scaled to enterprise. Children's New Orleans just yesterday let us know they've signed a 3-year, $450,000 contract for going up to enterprise. We've got content sharing between hospitals and between clinics. We provide value across the continuum. We just signed our latest customer in hospice and are able to now start sharing content across institutions. We launched in December of 2016, first commercial sales. Since then, we've had 10x year-over-year growth in regards to contract volume. We've already got $450K of renewals committed for this year. We've got a lot of big names in the pipeline that are in proposal and negotiation stages. We've got affirmation, we're MedTech Breakthroughs, Best Overall Digital Health and Innovation for 2018, and announced just today, if you look at your feed from Fierce Healthcare, we're one of the top 15 companies, part of their Fierce 15 for tackling healthcare's greatest challenges. Experience matters. I bring medicine. We're about interprofessionalism. Carol brings 30 years of nursing leadership, Stanford, UCLA, Duke. Ed brings engagement. This is not about healthcare IT. He's 20 years experience in digital games. SimCity Online, he pushed that out. Scott brings 30 years experience in IT, Athena Health and WebMD, and Lane brings us 20 to 30 years of experience in enterprise sales. We're backed by Y Combinator. Lead investor is Launchpad Digital Health. Amongst our investors here, Medforce, Carrie Adams over here in the audience. Last year, or 2017, we were a $1.3 million seed round, and we're looking to as we move towards exit, who are the people who need to close that gap? Medical device companies. How do I push my equipment out, see that it scales with training? What's the feedback? Learning management systems, healthcare IT, publishing firm. All of them need to address this issue, and that leaves us with the opportunity today. We've got a 1 million bridge note. We've closed 600K to date. We're looking for another 400K. Series A middle of next year. All of this going to expand sales, client success, and product.
What's the value inflection point do you get after the first round of funding?
So what, I'm not sure I understand that, but the idea, what we want to do here with our bridge is help us to get a little more of these clients in the pipeline so we can get to $1 million ARR by the middle of next year, and that would be a good metric for us to be able to go for Series A. Yes?
How much of your content is custom to the institution that you're working with as opposed to?
You know what's
generic?
kind of cool here? Everything is kind of in a way custom, but we ask that, hey, Melissa, you've got some content that you put here. It's your choice. Do you want to keep this private, or are you willing to share? And we find a surprising number of people are willing to share. So then when Greg, across the country, is then as a manager looking, you know what? Our problems are all pretty much the same. Hey, this is what Melissa's doing in San Francisco. That's cool. Either I'm going to take it wholesale and improve it, or I'm going to take it and I'm going to tweak it to fit my house and deploy it. So we're getting growing amount of sharing across these institutional silos.
What exactly is it you're doing to produce, package, or distribute the content that all of the publishers you said are failing at this aren't doing, and why can you do it if they can?
So what we're doing is we're converting stuff to micro, to bite-sized learning, and we're doing this through multiple types of media. What publishing houses are doing are saying, hey, I want to be able to get my national authors to come in here and tell you this is how to do it. But what we believe really the future is about really personalization and user-generated content. User-generated content is what we see across social media today, and it's exploding. So we don't need to pay all these authors. Rather, we find all these little stars here that are solving their local solution, and then we're allowing them to share across the industry. So instead of top-down, we're coming bottom-up. Yes?
So what sort of margin do you expect as you get into the next phase?
Margin from a, you're talking about from a
Profit.
profitability?
Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of SaaS, the gift that keeps on giving is the idea. Is so there that really the more that we scale and the more that we find that the Melissas are sharing with the Gregs, each one of those, that means for each client that comes on board, it's less and less effort. And so with that, yeah, it gets bigger. Now, how fast that's going to grow, we've got various projections. I don't know really what to make of that, but I would, like I said, we're anticipating to hit $1 million middle of this year and should be able to scale up pretty fast from there.
So how deep is your selection of content right now?
So I would think of us as more of a platform play as opposed to a content play. The content play is gravy that is coming on and people are sharing it. But when we come into a hospital, Lindy, if I came into your hospital, it's not about, let me boil all of your content in. It's, Lindy, what are the top 5 things you want to drive right now? We're going to drive that for you. You're going to be successful as an executive in getting your change done. And what you're going to find as you deploy this, you start listening to your front lines, they're going to tell you what else they want. And it builds out from there. So it's much more about strategic implementation of best practices, and over time it becomes more and more about content.
So
Time for one more question.
what is the IP involved here?
So the IP on this, so this, from a code standpoint, that's all us. And as we're collecting more and more information from this feedback loop, and we're getting more and more insight into caregiver behavior, that's where we're starting to look at how we can fold in the machine learning and AI to get ultimately a systems pattern to this. But yeah, the IP piece as opposed to a drug or a device that you're thinking about, that's very different. But what we have is the ability to move quickly and scale, create communities, and that becomes a barrier to entry. And as content comes in, a barrier to shrink.
Okay, I think our time's up.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ernie. Okay, next up is DTX Pharma. DTX Pharma is a J-Labs company out of San Diego. Arthur, is it working?
Looks good. Thank you. So I'm Artie Suko, the CEO of DTX Pharma down in San Diego, California. At DTX, we are utilizing fatty acids as targeting ligands to prevent the expression of disease-causing genes. Initially, we were focused on developing therapeutics for indications, orphan indications, like retinitis pigmentosa in the eye, but in the longer term, we believe there's an opportunity to break open new therapeutic areas for this novel class of medicines. So diseases are caused by proteins, typically overexpressed, misfolded, or mutated in such a way that makes them toxic. And RNA medicines have the potential to treat many of these chronic debilitating diseases. These RNA medicines are essentially short codes of RNA or DNA that prevent the expression of the message that drives the expression of these disease-causing proteins. siRNAs are a member or fall under the umbrella of this class, and they're unique because they can access targets that are undruggable by small molecules or protein biologics. The last few years have been a turning point for this class of medicines. 4 approvals, a few $1 billion in sales. Additionally, on the deal front, there's been large upfront payments for assets that are very early on in development, like ours. The single biggest obstacle limiting the expansion of this class is really delivery, and an explosion really to 100 billion plus in sales, potentially. And that delivery challenge is twofold. One, siRNAs are not effectively taken up by cells. And secondly, when you inject these, there's a pharmacokinetic challenge in that they are cleared rapidly by the liver and the kidney. The competition solution to this problem is to use lipid nanoparticles, which are large and highly charged particles that in a dish allow you to get into cells, but when you bring these in vivo, they get stuck in the liver and they're highly cytotoxic, limiting therapeutic utility. The other solution to this problem is the use of targeting ligands. A highly successful example of this approach is the use of GalNAc, which is a sugar that interacts specifically with receptors that are expressed exclusively on the membranes of hepatocytes. And this is great for getting you into this particular cell type. It's also much safer than lipid nanoparticles, but the limited distribution of the receptor and that it doesn't solve the PK challenge limits the utility to liver indications. So this is where DTX comes in. So instead of we use a targeting ligand approach, but instead of sugar, we use fatty acids. And this fatty acid approach not only solves the cellular uptake problem, allowing us to broadly get into many cell types, it also solves the PK problem, allowing us to access cells beyond the liver and kidney and tissues. So let me show you how it works. So here we have the DTX. We're using endothelial cells that are very difficult to get oligonucleotide therapeutics into. As you can see, when you put the unconjugated siRNA onto these cells, it has no effect to repress mRNA expression. When you put a lipid on there, again, as described in the literature, you don't get any effect at these doses and time points. But when you utilize the motif that we've identified, you get very potent and highly efficacious activity of the mRNA, 80% reduction. So this also works in vivo. So we've injected it into the eye via intravitreal injection. I'm showing you retinas here, and you can see the DTX motif enables very potent or very efficacious repression relative to an unconjugated siRNA. Importantly, it also distributes broadly throughout the retina, even to the photoreceptor cells that are impacted in retinitis pigmentosa. And so you can see, that there's far fewer pink dots, mRNA transcripts when you treat with DTX technology versus a vehicle control. Finally, we also can deliver systemically. So this is an injection intravenously into the mouse, and you can see that we get repression of mRNA in muscle, heart, fat, lung, as well as the liver. Leveraging this technology, we have been able to identify a lead candidate for a genetic form of retinitis pigmentosa. This lead conjugate specifically gets rid of the toxic protein without affecting the good wild-type protein. Relative to the competition, a large oligonucleotide company playing in this space, we are far more potent and selective to get rid of the toxic protein. So DTX was founded as an idea a little over a year ago. And since then, we've raised $2 million and taken it from idea through to in vivo proof of concept. The idea came from work that I did at J&J, working on fatty acid receptors and how these interact with cells. And additionally, work I did at AstraZeneca, leveraging lipids to prolong the half-life of peptides. This has been, there's multiple billion-dollar drugs that utilize these kinds of fatty acids. So we took this idea, so we looked at this space, and we saw that, this was a very underexplored area, and so we set out to understand a number of fatty acids, types of fatty acids, orientation of fatty acids, and resulted in the data that I showed you today. So leveraging with this technology, we're hoping to raise $30 million over the next 3 years to advance a clinical candidate into development and build a pipeline of drugs for orphan indications like we showed today. If you'd like to know more about it, I'm happy to talk after this lecture. Thank you.
So can you talk about the 3 types of partnerships that you envision?
Yeah, so in this year, it's probably more realistic or likely, we're talking to people about technology proof of concept. So let's say you're interested in heart disease, a target, working together with that partner to demonstrate, say it goes to the heart muscle. There's also the opportunity for target-based partnerships, and there's multiple sort of angles on this. So one, you're a drug company, you have targets you want to go after, they're validated, but you can't design a small molecule or an antibody to it. The other sort of angle on that is there are oligonucleotide companies that have developed these oligonucleotides. Maybe they use lipid nanoparticles, found out they're toxic, and they're stalled in development. We can help you rescue some of those assets. And there's many examples of that. Even one of the approved drugs may need rescuing. So there's opportunities across that. We're actively in varying levels of serious discussion, varying levels of discussions on that front.
You know, the ocular as a orphan disease. So what's the timeline for that?
So we have a lead asset. The goal for that one is to get first in human dose in 2021.
And why not pick one thing that you really believe in and where you think the effect is really powerful, prove that, and then move on? It sounds like several things alongside, some of which are even almost consulting, like helping others with their challenged assets, going after.
So there's a couple levels to that question. So we view the partnerships as enabling us to fund the development of our own internal assets. And that's important because as a pharmaceutical company, we need to have our own internal assets because that's what we're valued on. So I can't remember the first part of that question.
It was why that focus.
Oh, why build a pipeline? I mean, really the technology. So the rationale behind going into the eye first is one, small amounts of material, fastest path to clinical proof of concept. It's a validated dosing strategy. And the other thing that's underappreciated about oligonucleotide therapeutics is they have a long duration of action. You do a single dose and you can get 6 months to a year of coverage. So that's why we really like the local approach. Sort of the holy grail of this class of therapeutics is to be able to go beyond the liver. And so having a sort of picking 3 assets to develop, I would say more sequentially than in parallel to some extent, some de-risks some of the different assets, right? Picking one, you bet your technology on that one single asset versus having a pipeline. So it's conducive to building a pipeline.
Do you have to develop different lipid formulations for different types of cancers, or is it one?
So the motif works universally across cells. I will say for systemic delivery, there are modifications that we can improve upon the delivery to muscle and say that we otherwise don't need to use in a local context.
Well, how do you prevent them delivery to some place that you don't want them to get in toxicities?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Our technology is probably not the solution to that. You have to think about the target very carefully that you're going after. And so if it's a target that's expressed in multiple tissues and engaging it in one tissue versus the other is going to result in toxicity, that's probably not a target we would go after. We will leverage specific expression, say by a muscle cell of some protein to tackle that. There's also, this is just proof of concept that you can leverage fatty acids. There are receptors for fatty acids that are exquisitely expressed by certain cell types, and you can imagine developing motifs to target. And so, it's a distraction, but a big company, a 10 or 15 person company can devote 1 FTE to identifying, to leveraging that.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much, Arthur.
That's catchy.
Okay, our next company is SutureGuard. SutureGuard is out of Otrady.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dan Ladzinski down from Portland, Oregon with my web feed ready for the rain. We're on a mission to close more wounds at SutureGuard Medical. As a plastic surgeon for over 30 years, I encountered this problem frequently, where in treating a cancer or non-cancerous lesion, enough skin is removed that the doctor can't close it primarily. The wound's too big. So what happens? Typically they would be referred to a specialist like myself or one of my colleagues for a flap or a graft. This would often require the use of the operating room and greater cost, or they would be sent out by the skin cancer surgeon and say, hey, you're just going to have to heal this on your own. Here's some wound care, and it might take weeks or months to heal. And while the patient's undergoing secondary natural healing, they're at risk. So we wanted to get a solution to close more wounds. SutureGuard is a very easy to use, easy to integrate device that works into normal workflow. What it does is it allows surgeons to apply an extreme amount of tension to the skin, and in that way cause it to be stretched optimally, and you can take a wound that can be not closable and make it closable, because skin can be stretched with our technology in about 30 minutes to about 150% of its length. So we can take a 3 centimeter diameter wound and turn it to 1.5 centimeters and make it closable in a linear fashion. The way this works is because this works sort of like in a marina where you see a fender between a boat and a dock. Our device cushions the suture, preventing it from being a knife-like edge and dispersing the pressure over the feet of the device, which optimally spread to disperse the pressure. The value proposition for our initial target market in skin cancer surgery is very strong. We're practicing value-based medicine here. Patients get the wound closed at point of service, fewer co-pays, less lost time at work and lifestyle. Provider now can close the wound that they couldn't close, and they bill for it. The payer, the insurance company, is saving $5,000 plus for every patient that gets a direct, simple closure and doesn't require a flap or graft. Our key patent's been issued. We have 7 other filings for our moat of IP. We're registered. We have a small team, 3 people. We introduced our product at a trade show. When we get our message to our customers, skin cancer surgeons, 50% of them bought the device, and we've had a 30% reorder rate. We have publications, and we're just given a grant to increase to the broader market. Not just skin cancer surgeons have this problem. Orthopedic surgeons, ENT surgeons, plastic surgeons, all surgeons encounter wounds that at times are difficult to close, and we can extend their scope and do more primary closures. Our revenue, as we increase volume, we can drive down our cost of goods. Our margins are already good. I would like to draw your attention that for every $1 million spent on our product, we're saving the health system probably $50 to $100 million in terms of flaps and grafts that do not have to be performed. And that's really to the tenets of value-based medicine. I'm out of Kaiser, and we're all about that, and recently retired from there. We do have competition in the field, but they're really scaled for larger wounds. Top closure and dermaclose are designed for abdominal trauma, large orthopedic trauma. We're really scaled for the skin cancer market, although we can scale up as well. Our device, anybody that can throw a stitch can use our device. It's a very easy to learn, short learning curve. Here's our competitive devices. You can see SutureGuard on your left is a simple device. It just integrates with a normal suture, whereas Top and dermaclose have what the salespeople call a fiddle factor, and they're harder to learn and use. Sorry, a post-lunch picture, but this example of this device in action, a skin cancer wound down the bone on the scalp was able to be closed. This went well beyond what I thought we could do with our device, but the lady didn't want to go to the operating room, said, can you try to close it? And that was done. But even a small wound on a toe, there's no extra skin on a toe. But if we can stretch the dimensions of the skin, close it primarily, we save that person a lot of suffering and get them a quick heal. Our exit strategy is to prove that we have a good market in skin cancer, and then demonstrate to our leverage partner who has bigger boots on the ground in the entire arena of surgery to take the message to our orthopedic colleagues, to our general surgeons, ENT. There's 50,000 surgeons out there. Right now we're dealing with 2,500 skin cancer surgeons. Milestones, we've already hit a lot of them. We're hoping to complete our seed round and expand our sales and marketing into the other surgical subspecialties beyond the skin cancer specialists. And in doing so, develop strategic partnerships to help bring the message out to all of our potential clients. We have a very strong clinical team. As a plastic surgeon, reconstruction, people would send me their failed wounds, or the ones they couldn't close. So we have a very keen understanding of where the pain points are in the market. I also did a lot of patent and consulting work for the device industry. Ryan, our board of director member at Exo Medtronic, would vet 300 companies a year for M&A. So he's trying to help us tailor our value optimally for a potential exit. Right now, our ask is $500,000 to complete our seed round. We've already raised $200. We have a $4 million post-money valuation. I didn't have this device in my practice, but I want your surgeon to have Suture Guard in their toolkit to help you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Robbie.
I stumbled across a report on the surgical wounds market, and the two top products that they have been talking about are one from what's called the Zip Line Medic.
Zipline from Israel.
And the other one is actually Ethicon that you have mentioned here. So while you are showing Ethicon as a partner here,
Right.
how's that competition play with your product?
Zipline is really based on an adhesive principle, and they only can apply a limited amount of force to their wound before it will eclipse the shear effects of the adhesive. It works very nicely for total knee repairs where there's no missing skin. When there's missing skin, it's an entirely different situation. It's one thing to bring open skin and then put it back together. Zipline does a very nice job. When you have to apply the kind of forces necessary to actually stretch the skin, this is where our technology outperforms it. Go ahead.
Sorry, so can you clarify where you are in the regulatory pathway?
Right, we're a class 1 device, so we're registered with the FDA and in the
Okay.
market.
And is that across all uses?
Well,
Or
we're
any
only,
particular indications?
no, we have instructions for use that just are safe practice. But this is a tool, and anytime I bring it to a surgeon, they imagine different uses for it. And that's part of our discovery process with our grant. Our orthopedic surgeons want to use it because the bridged construction allows you to bring skin together this way. When you bring skin together this way, you get a thicker weld than just this. And I showed it to a spine surgeon. He said, I'm going to put this in all my mid-back closures because I want this weld over my hardware below. Less chance of a hardware exposure and site infection. So different surgeons imagine different uses for this. Go ahead.
Do you leave the device on, or do you just stretch the skin? And then
Different indications. Our most common indication is in the setting of skin cancer. The cancer is removed, there's a wound. The doctor, most dermatologic surgeon, has a built-in hour time frame where they have to analyze the tissue anyway. During that time, they apply it, their assistant progressively tightens it. They come back an hour later, the margins are clear. Now they're, instead of closing this, they're closing this. And it's way more efficiency for their practice and for the patient. But it can be used on longer indications like the spine surgeon would like to use it.
Do they still have to raise a flap?
No, that's no undermining. So, and this is a real advantage for patients that are on blood thinners, elderly patients with Coumadin who commonly have skin cancer. So
You're not seeing any wound ischemia?
no, we're not seeing wound ischemia.
The exits in the field, is there a common ratio of what they are times sales or?
Well,
something
a
that's
common
something to look
exit
at?
in device field for revenue base would be 3 to 7x revenue. But about 20% of device companies are acquired pre-clinically. We're just at the cusp of going into market. So kind of depends on the negotiation dynamic.
Have you had strategic interest?
We had an offer for a 3-year exclusive contract to manufacture, package, sterilize, and sell our device with a larger strategic partner, privately held.
Great. I think we're just about out of time. Thank you very much, Dan. So our next company is Del Nova. Del Nova is another California Life Science Association company. Mary, all yours. The clicker is right there.
So thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mary Gardner. I'm the CEO and founder of Del Nova Inc. And I have a long history in the pharmaceutical industry. Most recently, I was the director of technology assessment, so I was evaluating deals on the other side for Hospira, now Pfizer. And prior to that, I was managing a tech transfer office out of a teaching hospital and academic institution. So all this background has prepared me for this opportunity. So this opportunity was inspired by an unmet need. So I didn't start with a solution, it started with the unmet need. And how it came about was, my husband and I were supposed to go out to dinner with this couple, and she canceled at the last minute, and so I called her up and I said, what's going on? And she goes, I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I had a Botox treatment and I looked like I had a stroke. And then I asked her, can't your doctor do anything to help? And she said, no, I have to wait for it to wear off. So you have these patients that are coming in and they're expecting to look better, and in the end they could look like this. Droopy eye is the most common side effect. People aren't totally aware of this. Spock brow, frozen face, misaligned lips. So all these side effects are temporary, but they can last for weeks or months. And so I've heard people say that they have Bell's palsy. So last year, Angelina Jolie publicized that she had Bell's palsy, and I'm wondering, did she really have Bell's palsy? So Botox itself has a black box warning on it because of the toxicity and the potential for serious side effects. However, luckily those are rare because the concentrations are quite low. Also used in medical applications, so not only aesthetic and cosmetic applications, but one of the uses of botulinum toxin injections, and I use the term Botox and botulinum toxin relatively, comparably, it's like Kleenex versus, tissue. And then the side effect for overactive bladder treatment is urinary retention requiring catheterization. And that's a pretty serious problem, and it can affect up to 30% of patients, especially the elderly. And if you have an elderly patient that can't self-catheterize, then you're looking at infections, a caregiver coming in 3 to 6 times a day to help catheterize. So this is another serious problem here. So what is the solution? It's a drug that's already available on the market, and it's used in anesthesia to reverse residual paralysis following a neuromuscular block procedure. And the IP around this is the method of use, IP, and it's targeted localized delivery. So you don't get side effects resulting from the drug itself. It's an anticholinesterase, and it will be formulated into a single-use, easy-to-use product. So why Del Nova? It's an experienced team, and it's a clear unmet need. And really, I don't have competition other than waiting for the drug to wear off and for the side effect to go away on its own. It's a clear path to exit, so I'm looking at a potential acquisition by a corporate strategic. And I have a great team, and my lead investor is Daniel Bradbury, and he's a former CEO of Amylin and has a number of serious investments. And also Edward Gunrow is on my board, who was the CSO of Hospira, and he's a great asset as well. And so I'm working with a team of neurobiologists, including UCSD, as well as a team out of St. Mary's, or University of St. Mary's. So the strategy is really to go forward with the 505(b)(2) for both the aesthetic as well as the therapeutic market. And there are a number of indications approved for Botox already, and it's a growing field, and it's a pretty simple development path forward because it is a known drug with known toxicities. I'm looking at a 505(b)(2) pathway, And my background is in the development of generics and making them more valuable. So this is a great case for that, and it's making a generic or potentially generic drug more valuable through having a better use and a different route of administration. So I'm looking at a potential exit at stage 2. So currently I'm in stage 1 and funded for stage 1. So I'm looking to top up the stage 1 investment as well as then starting to move into phase 2. So I've got some data showing proof of concept in both models. And I just want to show the market potential is 384 million, and these are potential exits. So Allergan is buying companies that are in their space, and the most recent one was Bonti, and they were acquired for $200 million, and this was a pre-revenue company as well. So thank you very much, and I hope you're interested in joining this opportunity.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, yes, question.
A quick question with respect to the medication itself. The typical anticholinesterase drug has a short half-life.
Right,
Botox is a very, very long half-life in the range of weeks to months.
right. So
How are you planning on formulating this medication?
So I am planning on having a longer acting formulation than the current product that's available for anesthesia use, for example. But I do not anticipate that, based on some of the animal work that we've done, that we'll have to extend the life to the life of the Botox itself. So once you establish neurotransmission by increasing the level of acetylcholine, then that should be sufficient to maintain the muscle connection. So we're proving that out, but with the longer acting formulations. But I do have a straightforward study where it does show that you get recovery faster. So that's what this drug does. It gives faster recovery, and you don't have to extend it all the way to the life that Botox is off.
Could you give some more detail underneath those revenue projections? What are you thinking about pricing? Who would pay for it?
So from what I understand, based on speaking to plastic surgeons, is they're seeing people come into their office from other centers, whether it be a med spa or, Botox party, and currently today they have no way of fixing the problem. So the plastic surgeon, for example, said, I had a mother of the bride come into my office, wedding was in 3 days, and he couldn't fix it. So they're all looking at having a product like this on hand. And the dermatologists tell me this is a game changer for them. Any other questions? And pricing, right now, my estimates are about the same as what you would pay for a Botox procedure.
And the patient would pay for it out of pocket, or do you think that would be insurance reimbursement?
They'd probably be happy to pay for it, that's true.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
So our next company is MedVector Clinical Trials. They're with Scale LA.
Hi, everybody. Maybe hand each one of the judges one of these, just to start off with. Don't worry, you're going to see it. Don't worry about that. Wanted to share something with everyone before we get started here. There's a saying that I love to say that goes, if you're in a room and you look around and you find you're the smartest person in it, you're in the wrong room. I have nothing to worry about here. There's been a lot of really good presentations and a lot of smart people at this conference. So is this the...
Yes, it is.
The device?
Yep,
all right.
that's it.
So we are MedVector. My name is Scott Stout. I'm the co-founder and CEO of MedVector. We are currently raising our Series A with a target of $5 to $7 million. We've already raised a seed round of $500,000 to get through all of our proof of concept. So our executive summary, basically accelerating clinical trials speeds up medicine. We all know that. MedVector is a turnkey patient recruitment solution used to increase participation,
generate revenue for hospitals, reduce costs to clinical trial sponsors, and bring life-saving advanced medicine to market more quickly. So we all know that the most difficult part about clinical trials is how long it takes. All of these products that we've seen earlier that are going to need FDA approval, the average time to market is more than 10 years. Now, the difficult part about this equation is, of course, we want to get this number lower, because that's the sweet spot, that's the key. But the thing that maybe some of you don't know is that the patent clock is 20 years, and it starts ticking the second you start your clinical trials. So if you spend 10 years going through clinical trials, you are losing your patent protection. And so you can imagine how motivated Big Pharma is to alleviate this problem. So, and as an example here, Humira, which is a medication that everybody's heard of, its sales last year were $16 billion with a B in 1 year. So if you do a little bit of math and you say, okay, if we move their clinical trial forward by 1 month, just 1 month, that's $1.3 billion in sales. And so not only does MedVector believe that we can move it forward a month, we believe that we can bring this down substantially. And I cheated. I made a video. So we're going to watch the video. I don't know how to make it play.
I can
you
try.
double click it
I can
there?
try, yeah.
If you put the cursor over...
The industry agrees. Patient recruitment is the #1 bottleneck for...
Bear with us. Technical difficulty.
Nice.
There we go.
Good work.
Oops, I'm sorry. I took it off again.
And then if you could turn it all the way up.
Yep.
No, it's not.
It was
We lost it.
There we are.
clinical studies. It's so bad that the average time to market for a new medication is more than 10 years, leading to skyrocketing drug costs, shrinking.
There we go.
The industry agrees. Patient recruitment is the #1 bottleneck for clinical studies. It's so bad that the average time to market for a new medication is more than 10 years, leading to skyrocketing drug costs, shrinking FDA approval rates, unreliable data, and worse, the loss of life-saving medications. Fortunately, MedVector is transforming the clinical trial marketplace by greatly increasing patient participation through telemedicine. Because finding more patients faster has staggering results, like faster time to market, less wasteful spending, more diverse subject groups, easier FDA approval, and even more affordable medications. So, how does it work? First, we quickly search our partner hospitals' patient records, enabling us to identify candidates in weeks instead of years. Then, MedVector connects subjects to studies using HIPAA-compliant video conferencing technology called telemedicine. Telemedicine eliminates geographic barriers and allows for more accurately diverse study populations. So, no more horrible commutes. And now anyone can participate in advanced medicine regardless of where they live. And because subjects use the facilities of their local hospitals, our partner hospitals generate billable revenue without the risk of losing patients to another hospital. Finding subjects is so important that drug company happily pays the hospital 200% more than Medicare, and sometimes even more. Sound too good to be true? Let's meet Karen. Karen's a patient at Texas Central Hospital, one of our partner hospitals. Trevor, the clinical trial principal investigator in California, is working with MedVector to identify subjects for a clinical study. Because Karen is in one of our partner hospitals, MedVector is able to see her patient records. It looks like she's a perfect candidate. So with the help of Karen's local doctor, she is introduced to Trevor, and a MedVector telemedicine device is shipped to Texas Central Hospital, ready to connect Karen to her first appointment. On the day of Karen's appointment, she checks in with staff and is ushered into a patient room, same as any doctor visit. Only for this visit, she's actually meeting with Trevor using the MedVector telemedicine device. That's brought into the room, opened up, and there's Trevor in California. While Trevor guides Karen through the necessary documents, the on-site nurse draws the required blood samples and aids in the physical examination. Since not everything can be included in the telemedicine device, if Karen needs a larger test, like an x-ray, the x-ray is taken on location, and the raw images are sent directly to the principal investigator for interpretation. So thanks to MedVector technology, Karen has access to advanced medicine. Trevor is able to enroll more subjects into his study. Our partner hospitals generate revenue even from uninsured patients. And drug companies get to save lives faster. All of which makes us at MedVector pretty happy. MedVector, transforming clinical trials.
All right. That was a 45-minute presentation that we were able to condense down into 3 minutes, and we're very happy about it.
The industry agrees. Patient recruitment is the #1.
There we go. I don't see. Want to expand it? No.
It's because you're still duplicating.
What's the idea of the device? Why have a suitcase?
It allows us to control it better. And so the doctor's offices that we're partnering with and the hospitals that we're partnering with, we can't always guarantee that there's going to be a webcam set up or the bandwidth is going to be good enough through the hospital's IT system. So this device right here actually has what's called a cradle point router in it. It's what they use on large motorhomes and cruise ships, and it creates its own very powerful Wi-Fi signal, and it's AT&T and Verizon. So we don't have to worry about us losing our connection to our football while it's in a hospital.
What are the other things that are in the suitcase? You say you gave a few things in there.
Sure. So in this, what we have is we have obviously the telemedicine display and the camera. The camera here on top was given to us by Logitech, and what that is that's actually remote controlled from the other end. So the patient doesn't have to constantly adjust the camera. The doctor on the other end can actually adjust and zoom, and there's actually quite a range on the camera, which is pretty nice. Then we have an ECG, which is hot swappable for whatever the study wants us to use. We have a digital stethoscope down there in the corner, and then this is a secondary camera. So if the doctor needs to see the bottom of your foot, you don't have to do acrobatics to get your foot in front of the camera. So this is our device, and I know that we're running low on time, and I've created some delays here with the tech, so we'll get back to it. So this is where we are right now, and this is what we've done, and this is where we're going. So we've already raised $500,000, and we've gotten through our proof of concept. So now we're looking to raise our Series A. We are still pre-revenue, just so everybody knows. We've got some key hires that we need to go through, and the target valuation is 15 to 22 pre-money. Then 2020, the focus is to scale the business, and we've got some metrics under here, and you guys have this slide in front of you as well. And these are our metric targets. And then in 2021, we hit break even actually very early if we hit our key goals. Our analyst, who's back in the corner, hates that we say break even here. He wants us to say profitability, but I want to keep it a little bit more conservative than that. And this is the year that we get to break even, if everything goes as planned.
Can we wrap up?
Sure. So this is our leadership. So it's myself, Dr. Dennis Patterson, who's in the back. This is his 7th startup. He's had multiple exits, including Wellspring Partners. Maybe some of you guys have heard of that. This one we're really excited about. This is an undisclosed executive. We can't list his name in the slide because he needs to protect himself. But after the raise, we have a verbal agreement. He is ready to come on board. And he was working with one of our competitors, and he contacted us and said, Scott, I think you're doing it right. We're doing it wrong. I want to come work for you guys. Nick Rosano is our acting CFO. The rest of the list is kind of acting placeholders for the moment, so they're not full-time employees. And Nick is part of Stanton Road Capital, which is part of our lead investor for our seed round. Competitive analysis, these are some of the competitors, these are some of our advantages, but it sounds like we're running
I think we're out
all
of
the
time, yeah.
So there we go, we can take questions from here.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
What are the barriers to entry?
For our competitors, so this is very much a network play. So it is not the device. While we have IP in the portable telemedicine device, the back end as far as the software, our hospital network, we don't have any patents, and that's a risk and also one of the difficulties in this startup. So I believe this is very much a network play similar to an eBay or an Uber, and it's about building that hospital network so we can identify those patients very quickly. And then once we're there, that becomes our barrier.
So what are the implications for clinical data collection and monitoring?
So we are not running any of the studies. So again, like the Uber model, we are not hiring drivers or buying cars. We're not hiring doctors. We're not collecting data. We're finding existing studies, and then we're identifying patients from anywhere in the country. That patient stays in their hospital while that local hospital generates revenue, even from an uninsured patient. So we're opening up a very new demographic for clinical studies, which the FDA is very happy with. And so we're virtually moving that patient to any clinical trial site that the pharma desires. So if they say, we like these three, then we drive them to those three. And those clinical trial sites can continue seeing patients physically, as they have been, but we're basically opening a virtual window to where they can fill in those gaps and create more bandwidth. And my vision is eventually we have call center style clinical trial sites that are open 24 hours a day, recruiting patients from all over the world, because the sun's always up somewhere.
So who pays you?
Pharma is the one that pays us, but it's indirectly. So this is a free service to the hospitals that are working with us, and we're driving patients to them, driving revenue to them. It's also a free service to the clinical trial sites that are working with us. So the way that we make money is we have pass-through revenue from any of the services that are rendered for that study. So that office visit, the X-ray, the MRI, the blood draw. All of those are billed through us at 200%, and sometimes even more. If Medicare price is terrible, then we charge a little bit more, and it passes through us to pharma. Now, the reason that this is the reason that works is it's 100% success based to pharma. So if we have a contract with pharma for a specific study and they're asking us to recruit to a specific location, we already have a contract pen that says if we find a patient, these are the costs for the services that you're requesting, this is our markup, and then you pay quickly. So our turnaround is, as far as payment, one thing to remember, everybody, is we are completely avoiding the insurance companies. So there's no pre-clearance that you need. There's no bill pay. There's no verification except through us. And as we pass it through, we pass it back. And we stay 100% out of the hospital's pocket. So it's not a profit share. With the hospital, we have our own markup on top of that. And the numbers look good.
What relationships do you have with pharma companies that validates this process?
So we needed to get through our proof of concept before we could start approaching pharma. So that's one of the reasons that we're here, is to build those relationships. We've had a lot of people along the way that have been that have asked us, hey, I want to introduce you to XYZ at Big Pharma X. And we've said, we're not ready yet. We need to get all the pieces together. And because there's so many moving parts and so many perspectives, one of the interesting questions is, who's your client? And well, pharma pays us, but we're not selling to pharma. We're selling to the hospitals because that's where we get the data. The clinical trial sites are the ones that are running the studies, but they are open to receiving as many patients as possible. So we're not collecting any data, and we're just the connector.
Sorry. No, well, if you're just the connector and you haven't deeply demonstrated the connections, where does the 15 to 22 million valuation come from?
It comes in a belief that this is a need that can be filled very quickly.
Startups should be valued on what they've done, not on what they might do in the future.
Fair enough, and a lot of startups are valued based off of a revenue number, but this is a pre-revenue company.
That was a tautological answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Scott.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, the last company presenting today is Atropos Therapeutics. They're a QB3 company.
And I'll say we were selected for NBC in San Carlos. So shout out there.
Okay.
Thank you to the organizers and the panel for being here. So my name is Tommy Nguyen. I'm CEO and co-founder of Atropos Therapeutics. And so you remember the name. So you remember our name. It comes from the mythical Greek fates who cut the thread of life, hence the logo. So our startup is focused on fighting aging as a general disease and to a lesser extent, no surprise, cancer as well. And I want to start on a personal level. So we all want to believe that in our golden years we'll be happy and healthy, much like this couple in the infomercial in the background. But the truth is more like as the title of the article below says, that getting old can suck. So I, as a former physician and a biotech investor, I wanted to try to make a difference with the best science that I could find. So now to define aging, it's basically a collection of changes in our body and mind, some of them called traits, other serious diseases. And so the treatment paradigm today is not working for us, which is to treat individual diseases for aging with approved therapies piecemeal. Now, we believe that someday in the future, may be able to treat these aging conditions with a common mechanism, maybe common drug. So some promising examples that you may have seen in the public, such from companies like Unity, Restore Bio, are caloric restriction, which operates through a mechanism of TORC1, and then senolysis, which I'll mention again for reference. Now, we'd like to introduce you to a new promising player, which is senomodulation. So this is a slide of the companies developing aging drugs by stage and mechanism. I mentioned TORC1, and then senolytics, which is focused on killing the so-called senescent cell, which I'll talk about later. So here we are at the top, uniquely trying not to kill the senescent cell, but trying to control the rate at which these cells form. Now, senescence is our science, and it's an irreversible growth arrest. And it's been shown that aging is associated with the accumulation of senescent cells, and that these cells are directly responsible through mouse models for age-related conditions, although cancer, as we'll talk about, may be different. Now, what's new here and what we're trying to do is that we believe that we can arrest these senescent cells at their precursor state, which is a non-dividing state called quiescence. And we believe this would be benign because most of our cells in our body are actually in this state, and it's non-dividing, so no predisposition to cancer. And we do this by following a proprietary conserved event, a marker we discovered, which is called ATRX foci, which is shown by,
Let me go back.
There it is, by these green dots. And so our platform, we call FATES, cutely, is able to screen tens of thousands of compounds to be able to tell which small molecules can block cells in quiescence and which ones can promote senescence. So as an example, the data on the right is a senosuppressor because in our platform, which shows HRX foci per cell on the x-axis, you see that the compound shifts the treated cells, which are black bars where the median is marked with a black arrow, leftward until at the highest dose it overlaps with a pure quiescent population marked by the yellow arrow, and vice versa for compounds that we've already identified which promote the senescence. So our revolutionary hypothesis, we hope, is that changing the number of senescent cells through formation will have clinical utility. Now in aging, the idea of reducing the cell number has basically been shown by senolysis, and we're following in their footsteps. On the cancer side, our co-founder Andy Koff showed that by increasing the prosenescence pathway involving a gene called cadherin-18, he was able to overcome resistance in vitro, and in the same type of cancer, lead to clinical benefit, doubling the survival in liposarcoma patients. So how do we get from this to creating value for the company and, more importantly, providing drugs that benefit patients? So we plan to deliver validated senomodulator compounds this year, for which we are funded on the aging side already by the NIH, and then test them in animal models, which eventually will tell us which diseases to prioritize and allow us to get into IND-enabling studies, which you need to get into clinical studies in patients. So obviously, we're early yet to say for sure, but the plan is to first target an orphan genetic syndrome, such as progeria shown here, for which there are only a few hundred patients, but which there is an accelerated FDA approval path. And then we plan to go into an acquired senescence syndrome with more patients, thousands of them. Now, as we validate this platform in aging and approach, we will then start to think about going after normal aging, but we won't do that from the outset. We also plan to deliver validated compounds going after, on the cancer side, resistant cancer, which could treat thousands of patients. Although I will say ahead of time that we plan to get this to the lead compound stage and perhaps partner it off to a pharma. Okay. The team is an important part of the story. We're marrying the science with business experience, and then we have a relevant experience from our bench of advisors. So we have 3 of the foremost academics in aging, senescence, and DNA damage, who are Jan Beej, John Sedevi, and John Petrini. Bill Tapp is a clinical trialist expert, and then Oliver Starch and Terry Calarco are 2 biopharma industry executives. The last slide. So we are proud that after founding ourselves 9 months ago, we raised $400,000 completely non-dilutively just to start the lab and to start the aging program. We're now planning to do our first seed investor round of at least $1 million to accomplish the use of proceeds in the cancer program that I alluded to, and also a skin initiative that we didn't have time to talk about. Now, this does not include a potential $2 million grant extension this year that we get from the NIH to continue the aging program, nor, and so we believe that the exit for investors could come by reaching clinical INDs in a couple of years, and of course, we, from biotech experience, will be able to get an exit through public or private markets or a strategic exit. So if you'd like to join our mission, please join us. Thank you.
So in what order are you following these 2 programs, first with cancer and then with skin? So are you raising money for both of them, or?
Yes, so we're taking care of aging to at least the end of the year. So we are the $1 million, and it's on the same platform. It will allow us to validate the platform, but also push the programs in cancer toward lead compound. I'm not promising lead compounds. I'm promising validated hits, screening hits, and screening efficacy in cancer, and then a skin initiative program on the xenosuppressor side. It's actually more of a consumer health play. We already have the first tool compound in the xenosuppressor, and we'd like to make a better one to take toward an FDA-approved drug, but the first gen one, we're going to screen in a primary human model that will allow us to see whether we can actually inhibit senescence there and provide perhaps a more cosmetic play. So that's what we're doing, and that's only $100,000 for that program.
Did you say, where did the IP emanate from?
Yes. May I go back on the slides? Easier.
I may have missed that.
No, you didn't miss it at all. I only meant to say.
But going back, is
yeah,
it working?
just one more.
One more?
Yeah. Okay. So we originally started in cancer, and my co-founder came out of Memorial Sloan Kettering. Now, please don't ask you questions about what the mess going on in Memorial Sloan Kettering that you see in the New York Times. But basically, we find ourselves in an enviable position that initially when we founded the company, that we were heavy in negotiations with them. They asked for a 20% royalty for pre-lead IP, and we wouldn't negotiate with them. So eventually they let that IP expire. We were able to refile the IP immediately. So at this point, on first to file, we have the only IP, there's no prior art that exists, and we pay 0% royalty to Memorial Sloan Kettering. So
Wow, congratulations.
and so obviously the big, oh, thank you.
And that's IP that covers what?
That covers the FATES platform, which has the proprietary method for doing all the screening, which we didn't cover all of it. There's safety, screening, there's what do you define as an ATRX foci, but there are also the initial tool compounds that came out of it, the first xenosuppressor, the first...
Okay, so it's all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you'll see the date, it was literally last Friday that we received. I didn't want to highlight how close to the wire it was.
Yeah.
But I think you all, with your experience, recognize that the real value, especially for pharma, is in chemical matter IP, which I think we're fairly close to delivering.
Do any of the distributors in the Tenderloin carry your product?
Distributors in the Tenderloin.
It's a joke.
No, but on a, well.
I'd like to go outside and get some.
I would say that there is, we don't talk about it here, but there is some basis to go after some compounds in alternative medicine, if that's what you might, yeah, I'm going to presume that's what you're talking about.
So the NIH doesn't really recognize aging. What was the grant funded for?
That's very perceptive. It was through the National Institute of Aging, but you always have to put an indication, so
Right.
it is for progeria,
Okay.
the first orphan genetic.
And was that like a phase 1?
It's a phase 1 SBI.
Okay.
And the nice thing for everyone who wants to follow us into aging is we just received this notice this year that all the SBIRs in aging are larger. So the phase 1 is typically 250,000. It's almost 400,000 in phase 1 for aging. The phase 2 is 1 to 1.5 million. Typically, it's 2 million for aging. Hence the 2 million number, I believe.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much, Tommy.